Steve Harvey walks onto his talk show stage with his usual charm and that big smile everyone knows. The audience claps and cheers, but there's something different in the air tonight. This isn't just another celebrity interview. Tonight, something deeper is about to happen. Steve looks into the camera and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is not only a boxing legend, but also a man whose heart is stronger than any punch he has ever thrown. Please welcome Manny Pacquiao." The crowd erupts with excitement as Manny enters. But unlike the flashy entrances of other stars, Manny walks in simply, humbly, with a gentle smile on his face. He shakes Steve's hand, bows slightly, and takes his seat. Steve pauses for a moment and then turns to his audience. When you hear the name Manny Pacquiao, what comes to your mind? Championship belts, knockouts, victories. But today, we're going to see a different side of him. Not the fighter in the ring, but the fighter in life. The room grows quiet. People lean forward, sensing that something meaningful is about to unfold. Steve looks at Manny and says, "Brother, the world knows you as a champion, but I believe that behind every champion, there's a story of sacrifice, a story of struggle. And I think the world has yet to hear yours." Manny smiles gently. He nods, acknowledging the truth of Steve's words, but he stays silent for now. Steve takes a deep breath and continues. People often see the glory, but not the pain. They celebrate the success, but they don't always understand the cost. Manny, I want our audience to see not just the man who wins in the ring, but the man who has faced battles far outside of it. The audience is silent now. Their excitement has shifted into curiosity. Every eye in the room is on Manny, waiting for him to speak. Steve then leans closer and says, "I'm about to ask you a question, and I'll be honest with you, Manny. I don't know if I'm ready for the answer, because I think it's going to hit me deeper than I expect." Manny sits still, calm, collected, his face full of quiet strength. And right there, in that moment, the audience knows. This is not just another interview. This is a story that will touch their hearts. Have you ever seen someone who looks strong on the outside but carries hidden battles inside? What would you ask them if you had the chance? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next part of this story might just inspire you even more. The room is filled with silence. Manny Pacquiao sits quietly, his calm presence almost disarming in a space that usually explodes with laughter and applause. Steve Harvey leans forward, his voice lower now, more personal, almost as if he's speaking to a friend rather than a guest on television. "Let me tell you something, Manny," Steve begins. "I grew up poor. I grew up struggling. And I know what it means to be hungry. But I've always wondered, how does a man go from nothing, from being overlooked, underestimated, even disrespected, to becoming a world champion? What was the fight outside the ring like for you?" The audience stirs. They've seen Steve Harvey make people laugh, but rarely do they see him open up like this. He's vulnerable. He's searching for something real. Manny doesn't answer right away. He simply folds his hands, bows his head slightly, and lets Steve's words sink in. That silence alone builds tension. The audience waits. Every second feels heavier. Steve continues, almost confessing now. "See, Manny, I remember being broke. I remember nights when I had nothing to eat. I remember being laughed at, told I'd never make it. And even now, with all the success I've had, sometimes those voices from the past, they don't leave me. They still haunt me." The crowd murmurs in agreement. Many in the audience know exactly what he's talking about. Poverty, doubt, rejection. They've lived it. Steve shakes his head. "And then I look at you, a man who came from even harder struggles, and yet you smile. You sit here calm, like none of it ever touched you. How? How do you carry that kind of pain and still carry yourself with so much grace?" The weight of the question hangs in the air. Manny looks at Steve, his eyes, gentle, full of understanding. But still, he doesn't rush to speak. He waits. That silence builds the suspense even more. The audience shifts in their seats, whispering softly as if they too are asking the same question in their hearts. And then Manny finally speaks, his voice soft, almost soothing. "Steve," he says, "the battles outside the ring, they were harder than any fight inside it. Because in the ring, you know who your opponent is. But in life, sometimes your opponent is hunger. Sometimes it's rejection. Sometimes it's the voice in your own head telling you to give up." The audience reacts, gasps, nods, some even whispering. "That's true." Manny continues. "When I was a boy, I didn't have shoes. I didn't have food. My family struggled every single day. People looked at me and saw nothing. Some laughed at me. Some ignored me. But Steve, I carried one thing that no one could take away from me. Hope. I believed, even when there was no reason to." Steve swallows hard. His eyes are already glassy. "Man," he whispers, "you don't know how much that hits me right here." He touches his chest. The audience sees it. They feel it. The tension is no longer just about Steve asking questions. It's about Steve wrestling with his own past, his own scars, and looking at Manny for an answer that might heal something deep inside him. But Manny doesn't rush to give all the answers. He simply lets the truth unfold slowly, piece by piece. "Steve," Manny says softly, "people disrespected me. They said I would never be anything. They said boxing was a waste of time. I heard all those voices too. But every time I stepped into the ring, I remembered those words. And I fought not just my opponent, but the doubt they tried to put inside me." The audience claps lightly, but it's not the usual loud cheer. It's a respectful, emotional response, the kind that comes when people are truly moved. Steve wipes his face quickly, trying to keep it together. "See, that's the part that gets me, man. People look at us now. They see the fame, the money, the lights. But they don't see the nights we cried ourselves to sleep. They don't see the days we walked hungry. They don't see the shame of being treated less than human." Manny nods. "Yes, and that's the real fight." The audience is captivated. Nobody is moving. Nobody is distracted. They are locked in. Steve leans back, almost overwhelmed. "I'm going to be real with you. Manny, sometimes I still feel that pain. Even after all these years, after all the blessings, sometimes I still hear those voices. And it makes me wonder, will they ever go away?" Manny looks at him, with the calm wisdom of a man who has fought more battles than most can imagine. "The voices don't go away," he says, "but you learn to speak louder than them. You learn to let your actions, your faith, and your love drown out the noise. That's how you win the fight outside the ring." The audience erupts in applause, some even standing. Steve tries to hold back, but his lips tremble. The camera would show it if this were on screen, but in this narration, the voice alone carries the weight. Manny sits quietly again, letting the words settle. He doesn't boast. He doesn't exaggerate. His humility itself is louder than any dramatic speech, and in that stillness, something powerful is happening. The tension isn't just about Manny's story anymore. It's about every person listening, the single mother in the back row, the young man chasing his dream, the elderly couple who once knew what it meant to go hungry. Everyone feels their own struggles reflected in Manny's calm strength. Steve takes a deep breath, almost whispering now. "Man, I thought I was bringing you here to inspire my audience, but you're hitting me harder than I expected." Manny just smiles, a quiet, almost fatherly smile. "That's because, Steve, the fight outside the ring is one we all share. Every one of us, you, me, them, everyone watching." The audience breaks into another round of applause, louder this time. Some clap through tears, others shout, "That's right." And just like that, the conflict is clear. It's not Manny versus an opponent. It's not Steve versus his past. It's all of us versus the struggles that life throws at us. And tonight, Manny Pacquiao is about to show Steve Harvey, and everyone listening, what it truly means to fight and to win. Have you ever felt haunted by voices from your past telling you that you'll never make it? How did you respond? The audience is still quiet, hanging on every word. Manny Pacquiao has just revealed that life outside the ring is often the toughest fight. But Steve Harvey isn't done. He leans in, searching for more. His voice softens, but his eyes are fixed on Manny. Manny, Steve says, you talk about voices, about doubt, about pain. But tell me this. When you walked into those early boxing gyms, when you looked around and saw kids with shoes, with trainers, with everything you didn't have, what did you feel? What went through your mind in that moment? Manny takes a breath. He doesn't answer right away, and that pause itself feels like a lesson. Then, in a calm, almost reflective tone, he says, I felt small. I felt invisible. Sometimes I felt like I didn't belong there. But I also felt something stronger inside me. A voice that told me, stay, keep going, don't quit. The audience murmurs, touched by the honesty. Manny isn't just sharing victories, he's sharing wounds. Steve nods slowly. You know, man, that's what amazes me about you. Most people, when they feel invisible, when they feel like they don't belong, they leave, they walk away. But you didn't. Why? Manny smiles faintly. Because I had no choice. Walking away meant going back to hunger, going back to nights where my family didn't eat. Boxing wasn't just a dream for me, it was survival. The audience reacts, audibly, gasps, whispers of wow, even a few soft sobs. They're starting to understand the depth of Manny's journey. Steve shakes his head in disbelief. Man, I complain sometimes when life gets hard, but here you are, saying survival was the reason you fought. That hits me deep. Manny doesn't let the moment pass without turning it outward. He looks directly at Steve and then, almost as if speaking to every listener, says, But Steve, this isn't just about me. Every person here has a fight. Some are fighting poverty. Some are fighting doubt. Some are fighting sickness or loneliness. The ring may be different, but the battle is the same. The audience bursts into applause. The truth in his words cuts through every heart. Steve wipes his face, but this time he doesn't try to hide his emotion. Manny, let me ask you something personal. You've had people disrespect you, doubt you, look down on you, and yet, here you sit, smiling, calm, humble. How do you not get angry? How do you not let it turn you bitter? Manny chuckles softly. I do get angry sometimes. I am human. But I learned something. Anger is heavy. Anger will slow you down. If I carried that with me into the ring, I would lose. If I carried it with me in life, I would never find peace. So instead, I choose forgiveness. The words hang in the air like a sacred truth. The crowd is silent, processing what they just heard. Forgiveness, from a man who had every reason to be bitter. Steve shakes his head again. You forgive? Even the people who laughed at you? The people who disrespected you? Yes, Manny answers simply. Because holding on to hate only hurts me, not them. I would rather free myself. The audience responds with loud applause, some even shouting, Amen! It's no longer just an interview. It feels like a sermon, a life lesson delivered in real time. Steve leans back, overwhelmed. Man, you're teaching me tonight. You're teaching all of us. Manny then turns to Steve with a gentle, thoughtful expression. Steve, may I ask you something? Steve blinks, surprised. Of course, man. Go ahead. Manny asks softly. When you were struggling, when you had nothing, what kept you going? What stopped you from giving up? The crowd suddenly leans in. This is different. Manny, the guest, is now asking the host a question. The tables have turned. Steve laughs nervously, wiping his eyes. Well, you know me. I like to talk. But tonight, you got me thinking. He pauses, voice shaking. Honestly, man, it was faith. Faith that God had something bigger for me. And maybe, just maybe, a little stubbornness too. The audience claps, some nodding, some tearing up. They're witnessing not just a conversation but a connection. Manny nods in agreement. Yes, Faith, that is the key. Steve, sometimes the reason we smile even in pain is because we know the pain is not the end. It is only a part of the journey. The room erupts again. Applause, cheers, shouts of agreement. People are moved, not by drama alone, but by raw truth. Steve looks down, shakes his head, and then looks back at Manny. You know what, man? I thought I was bringing you here to inspire my audience, but right now, you're inspiring me. His voice cracks, his hand covering his face briefly. The crowd gasps. Steve Harvey, the entertainer, the strong personality, is fighting back tears. Manny leans forward slightly, still calm, still composed. Steve, inspiration is not about big words. It is about living in a way that shows others they can survive too. You and I, we are proof of that. The crowd claps again, a standing ovation from some, but Manny doesn't bask in it. He sits, quietly, hands folded, almost shy about the attention. His humility only deepens the impact of his words. At this point, the conflict is no longer about poverty or disrespect. It has become personal. Two men, one a world champion, the other a world-famous host, are opening their hearts to each other, and the audience can feel that something powerful is about to be revealed. If you were in Steve Harvey's seat right now, what question would you ask Manny Pacquiao? The studio is quiet now. The energy has shifted. Steve Harvey, a man known for laughter and jokes, sits in silence, his face softened by emotion. Manny Pacquiao has just spoken about forgiveness and survival. But everyone can sense there is more to this story, much more. Steve clears his throat, his voice hushed. Manny, I think people see the belts, the wins, the money, the fame. But they don't know the road you walked to get here. Tell us, man. Take us back. What was life like before the lights, before the cameras, before the world knew your name? Manny lowers his eyes for a moment. He takes a breath, and when he speaks, his tone changes. It is no longer the voice of a global superstar. It is the voice of a boy remembering where he came from. I grew up in General Santos City in the Philippines. Manny begins softly. We were poor, very poor. Sometimes there was nothing to eat. I remember nights when my stomach hurt from hunger. But I stayed quiet because I didn't want my mother to cry. I was the fourth of 6 children. My father, he left us when I was young. And after that, life became even harder. The audience leans forward. Every word carries weight. This is not the story of a champion. They are hearing the story of a child. Manny continues. I was just a boy when I left home to survive. I walked the streets barefoot, selling bread, donuts, anything I could, just to bring home a few coins. Sometimes I slept in the gym, sometimes on the street. I fought for food, not for glory, just for food. Gasps ripple through the crowd. People shake their heads, some covering their mouths, unable to imagine such struggle. Steve, visibly shaken, whispers, "You were just a child." Manny nods gently. Yes, a child who had to be a man. I remember one day, I saw other kids eating with their families in a small restaurant. I stood outside, looking through the window, wishing I could taste what they had. But I had no money. That night I promised myself, one day I will feed not just myself, but thousands. One day, no child around me will go hungry like I did. The audience breaks into applause, but Manny doesn't smile. His expression is serious, almost heavy. as he relives those memories. He goes on, "When I started boxing, people laughed at me. I was too skinny, too small. I didn't have proper shoes. I trained with holes in my gloves. Sometimes I ran without eating breakfast. But I had something they couldn't see. I had hunger, not just in my stomach, but in my soul." Steve leans back, wiping his face, overwhelmed. The crowd is silent again, listening like children gathered around a fire, waiting for every word. Manny's voice grows softer. "There were days I wanted to quit. Days I thought maybe this life will never change. But then I thought of my mother. I thought of my siblings. And I said to myself, if I give up, they give up. If I fall, they fall. I must keep going." Silence is broken by sniffles from the audience. Some are crying openly now. Manny pauses, his eyes glistening but steady. "When I finally started winning small fights, I used the money not for myself, but to buy rice, to buy food, to help my family. That was my joy. To see them eat, to see them smile, that was worth more than any trophy." Steve can't hold it anymore. He puts his hand on his chest and whispers, "Lord have mercy." His voice trembles. "Man, you're telling me you fought just to put food on the table. That's a whole different level of fight." Manny nods slowly. "Yes. And that is why, Steve, I never forget where I came from. Because the boy who was hungry yesterday is the man who feeds others today. I am that boy, and I will never stop being that boy." The audience rises to its feet, applauding, some with tears streaming down their faces. It is no longer just a talk show. It is a testimony. But Manny isn't finished. He adds quietly, "I want people to understand. Fame and money do not erase the pain of the past. What heals us is purpose. My purpose is to help. That is why I give. That is why I build homes for the poor. That is why I support education for children. Because I know what it feels like to have nothing. And I know what it feels like to be given a chance." The audience claps again, this time more gently, as though honoring a sacred truth. Steve shakes his head, his voice breaking. "Man, I thought I brought you here to tell a story. But what you gave us tonight, it's a lesson, a reminder, a wake-up call." He looks into the audience, his eyes red with tears. How many of us forget where we came from? How many of us complain when we already have more than some people could ever dream of? This man, he went from sleeping in gyms to feeding thousands. And he's sitting here smiling. The camera catches people in the crowd wiping their eyes. Some nod in agreement, some bow their heads in silence. Manny speaks one last time, his words gentle but firm. "I want everyone listening to know this. You may feel small. You may feel invisible. You may feel forgotten. But if you keep fighting, if you keep believing, God can turn your struggle into strength. He can turn your hunger into hope." The room explodes in applause, a standing ovation that lasts longer this time. Steve Harvey stands too, his hands raised, his face shining with tears. And for a moment, the talk show doesn't feel like television. It feels like church. It feels like family. It feels like hope. Have you ever faced days when you felt invisible? When life seemed too heavy to carry? How did you keep going? The audience is still on their feet. Steve Harvey has tears in his eyes. Manny Pacquiao has just taken them on a journey back to his childhood. Barefoot, hungry, forgotten. But in the silence that follows, something deeper is about to unfold. Steve takes a shaky breath and asks softly, "Manny, when you look back now, when you see how far you've come, what's the truth that people don't see? What's the part of your story that never makes the headlines?" Manny lowers his head. For a moment, the studio is so quiet you can hear the breath of anticipation. Then he begins. The truth, he says slowly, is that I should not even be here. Many times in my life, I was close to giving up. I was close to losing myself. But God, He had other plans. The audience murmurs, leaning in closer. Manny continues. When I was young, I thought money was the answer. I thought if I could earn enough, everything would be okay. But when I became champion, when I had money, I realized money does not heal the soul. It can feed the body, but it cannot feed the spirit. Gasps ripple through the crowd. The audience expected triumph, but Manny gives them truth. He goes on, I made mistakes. I lived without discipline outside the ring. I lost myself in fame, in temptation, in distractions. People looked at me and saw a champion. But inside, I was broken. That is the part nobody saw. The room is still. Steve leans forward, stunned. Manny's voice softens even more. I remember the moment I almost lost everything. My family was hurting, my heart was empty, and I realized the boy who once fought to survive had forgotten why he was fighting. That was my wake-up call. The audience gasps again. Some nod, recognizing their own struggles in his words. Steve shakes, his head in disbelief. Man, you're telling me you went from nothing to everything, and it still wasn't enough? Manny nods. Yes, because without God, without purpose, nothing is ever enough. That is the truth. My strength, my victories, they are not mine alone. They are His gift. The audience erupts into applause, many people standing again. Some shout words of agreement, others simply cry quietly in their seats. Steve's voice cracks. Brother, you're teaching us something powerful tonight. You're saying success without meaning is just another kind of emptiness. Manny nods gently. Exactly. That is why I live differently now. I use boxing not just to win belts, but to open doors for the poor, for the hungry, for the forgotten. I build homes. I give scholarships. I support churches. Because the truth is, my life was never just about me. It was always about serving. The audience claps again, their hearts captured by the honesty of a man who refuses to let fame erase his past. Then something unexpected happens. Members of the audience begin to whisper to each other. Stories surface. One woman stands up, her voice trembling. Manny, I'm from the Philippines too. I've seen the homes you built. I've seen the families you've helped. They still talk about you, not as a boxer, but as a man who never forgot where he came from. The audience gasps and claps. Manny bows his head humbly, his hands folded, almost embarrassed by the praise. Another voice calls out, a man in the back. My cousin received a scholarship from your foundation. He was the first in our family to graduate college because of you. The audience roars with applause. Whispers turn into cheers. The truth is no longer hidden. Manny Pacquiao is not just a fighter in the ring, he is a fighter for his people. Steve is overwhelmed, his hand covering his mouth. He shakes his head, then looks at Manny. Do you hear this? Do you see what you've done? This is your real championship belt, man. Not the gold, not the titles, this right here. The crowd claps louder, some rising to their feet again. Manny smiles softly, tears forming in his eyes. He responds humbly. This is why I live the way I live, because I know what it means to be hungry. I know what it means to be invisible, and I cannot let others feel forgotten while I have the chance to help. The truth has been revealed, not the truth of his punches, but the truth of his heart. Steve's voice trembles again. Man, I've interviewed presidents, kings, athletes, actors, but I don't think I've ever heard a truth this raw, this real. You're teaching us that greatness is not about what you take, it's about what you give. The audience breaks into thunderous applause, stamping their feet, clapping their hands, crying out in agreement. Manny nods, his expression calm, his tone steady. If there is one thing I want everyone to take away tonight, it is this. Do not measure your life by what you own. Measure it by what you share. That is the only measure that lasts. The crowd explodes one final time, clapping, cheering, shouting. Manny's name. The truth is clear now, not just to Steve, not just to the audience in the studio, but to every listener watching around the world. Manny Pacquiao is not simply a champion of boxing. He is a champion of humanity. What do you think defines real success? Wealth, fame, or the lives we touch? Share your answer in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe, because in the next part, Manny's story takes a turn that will leave you inspired in ways you never imagined. The studio is still vibrating with energy. The truth about Manny Pacquiao's life, his hunger, his mistakes, his redemption, has left everyone shaken. Steve Harvey wipes his eyes trying to steady himself. The audience is emotional, clapping, whispering, holding on to every word. And then comes the shift. The transformation moment. Steve leans forward, his voice low but urgent. Manny, you've told us about your past, your struggles, your mistakes, and your truth. But tell me this. What made you decide to change? What made you live differently? Manny takes a breath. His eyes glisten, but his voice is calm. The turning point, he begins, was when I realized everything I had, my strength, my fame, my wealth, it was not really mine. It was given to me, so I could give it to others. That day I told myself, I will not live for myself anymore. I will live for purpose. The audience is silent. Then, as if on cue, Steve says, "Give us an example, Manny. How did you put that into action?" Manny nods. "I remember the first time I gave back in a big way. I built homes for families living in shacks made of scrap wood and tin. I handed them the keys and saw their faces light up. That was better than winning any fight. That was when I knew. I had found the real reason for my life." The crowd claps, some people standing. But Manny isn't finished. He adds, "Another time I visited children in hospitals. They were sick, weak, some of them fighting for their lives. I sat beside them, prayed with them, held their hands. I saw hope in their eyes, even when their bodies were weak. That hope changed me. It reminded me of the boy I used to be, praying for someone to care." The audience breaks again into applause. Tears flow freely now, not just from Steve, not just from Manny, but from strangers in the crowd who feel the weight of his words. Steve whispers, almost to himself, "Man, this is real power, not the kind that knocks people out, but the kind that lifts people up." Manny nods gently. "Yes, that is the power I believe in. That is why, Steve, I live differently now. Every fight I win, every blessing I receive, I use it to help others, because at the end of the day, the championship belt will fade. But kindness, that will last forever." The audience cheers, shouting Manny's name. Some hold their hands to their hearts, others wipe their tears. And then Steve, still emotional, says something unexpected. "Brother, you just made me think of something. I've been blessed too, but sometimes I forget how much more I could be doing. Tonight, you didn't just share your story, you challenged all of us to do better." The crowd claps loudly, some nodding in agreement. The transformation is not only Manny's, it is spreading to everyone in the room. Manny responds softly, "We all have something to give. It doesn't matter if it's money, time, or just love. What matters is the heart behind it. The world changes when we decide to share." The audience roars in applause again, standing on their feet. The energy in the room has transformed. What began as a talk show has turned into a movement. Steve, wiping his tears, looks directly at Manny. "Man, I invited a boxing legend, but what I got was a life teacher. You've changed me tonight. You've changed all of us. The audience cheers louder, many clapping until their hands hurt. And then Manny delivers his final blow, not with fists, but with words. His voice is steady, his tone powerful. If you want to be great, don't look at how many people serve you. Look at how many people you serve. That is true greatness. That is the only championship that never fades. The crowd erupts in a standing ovation, people shouting, crying, clapping. Steve Harvey stands too, raising Manny's hand like a referee, declaring a winner. But this time, the victory is not in boxing. It is in life. In this moment, the transformation is complete. Manny Pacquiao has gone from a hungry boy on the streets to a man who feeds nations, from a fighter for survival to a fighter for humanity, from a champion in the ring to a champion in the hearts of millions. The audience knows they are witnessing something historic. The transformation is not just Manny's, it is theirs too. Everyone leaves with a seed planted in their hearts, a call to live with humility, purpose, and kindness. Have you ever had a moment that transformed your life, a turning point that made you see everything differently? Share your story in the comments. Your words may inspire someone else's transformation today. The standing ovation refuses to die down. The studio is alive with energy, people clapping, cheering, crying. Steve Harvey is visibly moved, his usual booming laughter replaced with tears of gratitude. He takes Manny Pacquiao's hand, holding it firmly as though afraid to let go of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve says, his voice trembling, "tonight, we didn't just hear from a world champion. We heard from a world changer, the cow." Audience roars, their voices echoing through the hall. Manny bows his head humbly, pressing his hand to his chest. His posture says it all. He doesn't want glory. He wants the message to shine brighter than himself. Steve wipes his face and continues, "Brother, you came here as a guest, but you're leaving as family. And I promise you, I'll never forget what you've taught me tonight." The crowd claps, softer now, sensing the final chapter of this emotional journey. The atmosphere is reverent, as though everyone is part of something sacred. Manny finally speaks. His voice is steady, yet tender. "I want to thank you, Steve, and I want to thank everyone here. But before I go, let me say this. Do not wait to be rich. Do not wait to be famous. Do not wait for tomorrow. Start helping people today. A kind word, a smile, a hand to lift someone up. These things cost nothing, but they can change everything." The audience gasps, then claps again. People nod their heads, some whispering amen, others wiping away tears. Manny continues, "I was a boy with nothing. I know what it feels like to be hungry, to be hopeless, to feel invisible. But one act of kindness can remind someone that they matter. You can be that person for someone else, and that, my friends, is the greatest calling of all." The room explodes in applause. Steve stands to his feet again, unable to contain himself. "That's it, right there, that's the message. Don't wait, start today." The crowd claps louder, chanting Manny's name. "Pacquiao! Pacquiao! Pacquiao!" But Manny raises his hand gently, calming them. His smile is soft, his eyes shining. "No," he says humbly, "don't remember my name, remember the lesson. Because this story is not about me, it is about what we all can do together." The audience is stunned into silence, then bursts into the loudest ovation of the night. It is no longer just admiration, it is conviction. The transformation has reached its peak. Steve, almost speechless, finally says, "I think I speak for everyone when I say, you've changed us tonight, and maybe, just maybe, we'll walk out of here as better people than we walked in." The crowd cheers again, their applause now mixed with shouts of gratitude. Some people in the front row stand with their hands raised, others close their eyes as if holding on to the weight of the moment. Manny places his hand over his heart once more. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And remember, real champions are not made in the ring. They are made in life, when we choose love, humility, and kindness. The final words echo through the hall like a bell. The crowd is on their feet, cheering with all their hearts. The ovation lasts minutes, but the impact will last a lifetime. Steve Harvey, still holding Manny's hand, turns to the camera. His voice is strong again, though heavy with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Talk about it. Live it. And remember, every single one of you has the power to inspire, just like Manny did tonight. The audience claps once more as the screen begins to fade. The last thing viewers see is Manny Pacquiao smiling humbly, waving to the crowd, not as a celebrity, not as a champion, but as a servant of purpose. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your story matters too. Remember, kindness is free, but its impact is priceless. Be the reason someone believes in hope again.